Hi, I'm Cameron Sauers from the Civil War Institute here at Gettysburg College on the battlefield at Gettysburg National Military Park. The stories we choose to tell on this battlefield have a broader implication for our understanding of the war and its legacy. This interpretive video attempts to broaden our understanding of what the brutal fighting on this ground was truly about for the combatants who clashed here. What were the long-term stakes of this battle for each side, and how did its survivors try to ensure that clashes such as this one did not occur in vain? What force has the politics of public memory had in the interpretation of shaping our understanding of this ground? Today, we'll expand past the famous story of Francis Barlow and John Gordon to include the story of Adelbert Ames, a brigadier general in the 11th Corps who fought here and later played an important role in the political struggles of Reconstruction. Adelbert Ames is a Maine man, born and raised in the state. He is a West Point graduate of 1861, whose previous experience in the war before Gettysburg saw him serve in the artillery arm of the Army of the Potomac, colonel of the 20th Maine, and at the Battle of Chancellorsville serve on the staff of George Gordon Meade before receiving a role as a brigadier general in the 11th Corps. On the first day here at Gettysburg, Ames's men come into Gettysburg on Washington Street, where his men are turned into a meadow on the side of von Gilsa's brigade, also of the 11th Corps. 11th Corps Acting Commander Carl Schurz wanted Ames's brigade in echelon, but Francis Barlow moved Ames to the right rear of the corps. All of Ames's brigade ended up on Blocher's Knoll in support of the artillery battery there. When von Gilsa's brigade pulls out, Ames finds himself in a difficult position. In attempts to salvage his brigade, he has the 75th Ohio fix bayonets to meet the advance of John Gordon's brigade, where the regiment of just 200 men from Ohio were checked by all of Gordon's fierce Georgians. There was no help to be had, called by the Ohio colonel as, quote, a fearful advance and made at a dreadful cost of life. An officer from Gordon's Georgians recorded that the enemy was stubborn but gave way with considerable loss. Ames's brigade found themselves outnumbered and outflanked. His Barlow's division had 3 Confederate brigades in front of them. In the words of a private from the 17th Connecticut, Barlow and Ames set an excellent example for the men and their command that day, with Barlow particularly singling out Ames's coolness and courage during the day's fighting. But at the end of the day, the 11th Corps left the battle with little or no regularity, with regimental organization being destroyed. Those were Ames's words in his report. This spot on the first day battlefield is normally where interpreters share a post-war story. The story of Francis Barlow and John B. Gordon has dominated our understanding of the memory of this particular section of the battlefield. The old legend has it that Gordon comforted the grievously wounded Barlow, assuming his wound to be mortal. Gordon claims to have overseen Barlow being carried from the field and his last wishes seemingly carried out, except Barlow survived the wounds and the war. The two men would meet then at a dinner party in 1879, where both men were shocked to hear that the other had survived the war. While it is indeed likely that Gordon encountered the wounded Barlow on the field, the apocryphal tale that Gordon published in his memoirs was a myth to create a reconciliationist narrative. The Gordon-Barlow story depicts a war between brothers, full of honor, forgiveness, and forgetting. Generations of battlefield goers have had comfort in the Gordon-Barlow story because it seems to confirm the desire to believe that the nation quickly became whole after the war. But exclusively telling that story obscures another story that we can and should tell on this same spot of ground. The post-war political struggles of Adelbert Ames, one of Barlow's subordinates here at Gettysburg, reveals an entirely different and more complex reality about the post-war lives of those who fought here, the meaning of the fighting they engaged in here, and how they continued that fighting off the battlefield during the contentious years of Reconstruction. Ames is assigned to the Army's occupation of Mississippi in 1867, where his witnessing of anti-black violence eroded any reservations he had about Reconstruction and black male suffrage. 1867 was the beginning of radical Reconstruction, where Mississippi elected 226 black men to public office and the first 2 black men to the U.S. Senate. By 1868, Ames had become provisional governor of Mississippi. Under Ames, Mississippi ratifies a new state constitution. As military governor, Ames garnered praise and criticism for dismissing state and local officials for having supported the Confederacy. Ames wrote in a letter that Reconstruction political disputes were between 2 classes of men, those who were loyal and those who were disloyal. Under Mississippi's readmission to the Union, Ames finds itself elected by the state legislature to become one of its senators, where he advocates measures protecting federal protection for black voters. In 1873, Ames is elected governor of Mississippi, thanks in part to Mississippi's newly enfranchised black population and Ames's commitment to ensuring black male suffrage. Serving as lieutenant governor under Ames's administration was Alexander Davis, one of 3 black statewide candidates to be elected in Mississippi. Ames' time as governor, though, was short-lived, as state Democrats enacted the so-called Mississippi Plan, which threatened violence to overtake political power in the state. In 1875, this plan included intimidation, voter fraud, and outright violence that included assaulting black political leaders and their white allies. The state became torn by political discord and bitterness. Unable to stem the violence ahead of the 1875 election, Democrats took control of the House and threatened Ames with impeachment should he fail to resign office. Lieutenant Governor Davis failed to resign, and he found himself convicted of bribery and theft and removed from office, all while the federal government ignored the hideous ways in which Southern Democrats had regained power. Ames himself, facing charges of impeachment, resigns from office and departs the state. These events, culminating in Rutherford Hayes' removal of federal troops from the South in 1876, led to John Lynch, Mississippi's last Republican congressman, to remark that, quote, "The war was fought in vain." However, the war was not. The real progress made through Union victory and during Reconstruction was palpable, even if it took decades for these advancements to be visible. By expanding our post-war battlefield interpretation beyond the feel-good reconciliationist story of Barlow and Gordon to include the difficult story of the struggles of Reconstruction, it helps us understand the complicated and long-term legacies of the Civil War. It helps us better understand what drove thousands of men into the melee of battle in the first place, and how many of them understood their reasons for doing so. For survivors, the post-war years revolved squarely around the battle to protect or undo the progress of the war. Thank you.